from Microbe TV, this is TWiP, This Week in Parasitism, episode 204, recorded on April 28th, 2022. Vincent Racaniello, and joining me today from Fort Lee, New Jersey, Dixon Despomier.
And as Daniel would say, hello, everybody. I don't want to exclude it this way. Vincent, it looks like a great day outside, but it really isn't. The temperature is in the low 50s. The wind is blowing up to 30 miles an hour. There's no rain. It's clear as a bell. So looks can be deceiving. And today I'm so happy that I'm sitting in a nice warm apartment chatting with three of my very best friends.
It's very chilly out, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You probably haven't been outside, have you?
It's typical spring weather, and already people are starting to complain about it. That's because we haven't had a typical spring in a long time.
Also joining us from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone, including you, Dixon.
Thank you for that addition, Daniel.
And from Glasgow, Scotland, Christina Naula.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here.
What does your last name mean, Christina Naula?
It's Naula. It's it doesn't mean anything. It's the name of a little village in northern Italy.
Yes, Naula. Okay, I've been saying it wrong. Naula.
No, it doesn't matter.
I got it. Yes, it does. I've got to say now. So the phonetic would be N-O-W-L-A. So I have to put that in the show notes so I remember.
That's okay. I don't mind.
No, you have to get people's names right. You know how many people massacre my name?
I can imagine. Yeah, the Italian pronunciation.
It's okay. We are not here to do pronunciation. We are here to do TWiP. And so let's go.
We actually do have a letter that actually talks about that. So we are here to do that. I think we should.
Actually, Christina, we had a shout out to you. I know you're a little behind on the COVID clinical updates, but we had a little shout out to you.
I did hear that.
It was either one or
yes, I did hear that. I was really delighted.
You can now come visit us. You can now, the vaccine.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I've actually had a full course of the Pfizer vaccine as well. So, I'm vaccinated up to my eyeballs. So.
Not as much as the guy in Germany who got 60 doses.
No, that's crazy. That's crazy. He's got an RNA vaccine coming out of his nose. So, Daniel, should Marlene and I get our fourth shot?
You're gonna, he should call into the Q&A with A and B, and they'll tell you.
Listen, I got a direct connection here. Come on,
ask Daniel. Let Daniel answer. Yeah, he's the physician.
Right. So should we do the case for TWiP 204?
Okay.
Yeah, we probably should do that. We should probably do that.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Dixon's over trying to get free advice there. I'll schedule a telehealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Send me a bill.
Okay.
I'll pay it.
Right. So
eventually.
The case from TWiP 204. Wow, 204. It seems so long ago, right, that I had joined back when we were, less than 100 here.
Yeah. This is true. True.
So, all right. So for those of you joining us for the first time, for those of you tuning back in, we presented at the tail end as our mystery case, a pregnant woman in her 20s living in eastern Ghana near the Volta River Delta. This is east of Accra, the capital. Often in and out of the river. She's currently in her second trimester. She comes in to this facility with abdominal pain, bloody diarrhea. A stool test is done, and what is seen but ovoid forms, about 160 microns. They have a large single lateral projection. There are also some other ovoid forms, about 45 by 30 microns, which contain polar bodies. And that's what we were left with.
All right. We have quite a few guesses, so let's start. Christina, can you take that first one? Christina's frozen.
No, she's not frozen.
I was
anymore.
muted.
She's
I was muted, not frozen. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. No. Two years in, Christina.
Right, I'll start again. Alexander writes, Dear TWiPsters, the patient from Ghana has two different kinds of egg in her stool. One of them, quite large with a characteristic lateral spine, must be the egg of Schistosoma mansoni, which is endemic in the region and can cause diarrhea and abdominal discomfort. She likely acquired these parasites by failing to towel off vigorously and immediately, per the recommendation of Dr. Griffin, after a bath in standing water. The other egg resembles those of Hymenelepis nana, a cestoid that can be found in most parts of the world and whose potential for pathogenesis is still unclear. As an infection is very commonly asymptomatic and often found concomitantly with other intestinal protozoa. Apologies, I had to do a quick cough there. The question is, of course, which infection is responsible for the symptoms? Putting our quest for truth to the side, a simple solution might be proposed. Treatment with praziquantel, 20 milligrams per kilogram, will be sufficient to treat both infections. And while we may be none the wiser, the patient will hopefully make a recovery. If this fails to yield results, another round of stool examination and peripheral consideration of the millions of other differentials of diarrhea might be in order. Thank you for this fascinating case. I had great fun as always. Best, Alexander from Vienna.
I've really millions of causes of diarrhea.
Oh, let's hope not millions.
It's a bit much. Dixon, can you take the next one?
I certainly can. Trevor writes, "Hi all. I really appreciate all you do to help educate us laymen, all things microbe related. Being retired now, I follow all your TWiV episodes and most of the other episodes when I can. While I have an arts degree with a science major, at most, I can only be considered a science advocate as I enjoyed a career in business. My first time writing you, related to TWiP 204 in the case of the 20-year-old pregnant woman with abdominal stress, regarding the larger oval, which I suggest might be schistosomiasis. This disease is prevalent in Ghana, near freshwater, with symptoms as described. The size of the eggs found in the feces are about right in the area of 150 microns and oval, with a single lateral projection. So my uneducated guess is Schistosoma mansoni, which I have selected due to its presence in the intestine rather than the urinary tract. Merck suggests treating with praziquantel, which is safe for pregnant women. Regarding the smaller ovoid present in the feces, I first thought that the cause was Ascaris laboratories, which had the added possible pathology of increasing pregnancy rates and giving the women's age and pregnant with their second child. It seemed like a possible fit. The size of the eggs in the feces were a possible match for the smaller ones observed ovals. However, the presence of polar bodies suggests that it might be Trichuris trichiura or whipworm. It is not unusual that both are present in certain individuals in certain areas. Treatment can be mebendazole or albendazole. Safety data might suggest that combined use of praziquantel and mebendazole may be tolerated. Surgery may also be an option. Here in Toronto, it's minus 8 degrees, mostly cloudy, but cool with very little wind. Not a bad day for a walk. Love all your shows. Regards, Trevor.
Daniel.
Y'all writes, Dear professors of the microverse, greetings from Sydney, Australia, where it hasn't stopped raining since the last episode. We have been having once-in-a-century weather events every year or so now, with severe bushfires and floods. But I have to say, the latest floods are quite extraordinary, with some places in the northern rivers being inundated by 17 meters of water, greater than 40 feet. Here is a picture of Lismore city center before and during the last flood. We have a McDonald's before. We can see this sign that's, well, probably, what is that, about 25 feet up there, 30 feet up. And yes, you can barely see the drive-through above the water.
That's
that is amazing.
Isn't it?
You see the tops of the trees. That's incredible.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? You can just barely see the tops of the trees sticking out.
My God.
Enough of my rant. I'm going to start believing in this global climate chaos and global warming stuff with pictures like this. But enough of my rant. To the case of the Ghanaian woman with abdominal symptoms. Again, not being a medical professional or a biologist, parasitologist, I only have Daniel's microfilarial size and shape to go by. The first one was quite distinct with its relatively large size and lateral protrusion. I think this would be Schistosoma mansoni. The second smaller one was a bit harder. At first, I thought it might be Schistosoma japonicum, but the egg size of japonicum was too large at 70 to 100 microns. And also from images, it looks like you don't have a bilateral or polar body inside. On the other hand, the description matches strongyloides to a T, so I would go with that. For treatment, I'm a bit conflicted and lost as I don't really know of any cross-reaction between different medications. On one hand, based on the WHO, praziquantel is the treatment of choice for all schistosoma. For strongyloides, it seems that ivermectin is the bee's knees. However, surprisingly, I've stumbled on a PubMed article about a Ghanaian 27-year-old male who was diagnosed in 2015 Spain with both schistosoma mansoni and strongyloides, but he was first treated with 2 doses per day of Basado antibiotic, so tetracycline for 20 days, and then with a single dose of 3 milligrams of ivermectin that was repeated after 3 months. Being completely uneducated in this, I can't make a call. Am I correct to think that all guesses from last week were actually incorrect, as the actual infection and symptoms of onchocerciasis are in fact due to Wolbachia bacteria? Can't wait for the next TWiP to drop and for my book to arrive. Y'all. And I guess I'm just going to address the onchocerciasis. No, that was actually onchocerciasis last time. Our discussion was about the role of Wolbachia in the life cycle of the filarial worms. And maybe we're even going to talk about a paper today where we talk a little bit. But that was river blindness. That was onchocerciasis last time.
Patrick writes, Dear TWiP, your call for more guesses several episodes back has borne much fruit. So as I write this amidst a hovering freezing mark and winter weather that refuses to yield its grip in Ontario, I'll try to make this a short email. Pregnant woman in TWiP 204, whom I thought might be suffering from 2 simultaneous infections, may in fact be suffering from a single parasitic infection. Diagnosis in part is relatively easy, for what parasite enthusiast could fail to recognize the telling lateral spine of Schistosoma mansoni. The major pathology in this case could be due to intestinal schistosomiasis related to the presence of eggs lodged in tissues and or destroying tissues with proteases in the small intestine. In my recent reading, I gather this is not an uncommon presentation of schistosomiasis in endemic regions. Treatment, praziquantel, 20 mg per kg twice a day. In this case, treatment is recommended by WHO regardless of pregnancy stage. CDC lists praziquantel as pregnancy category B. So I expect treatment with prazi proceeded. All this said, I am surely missing something with the secondary smaller ovoid form mentioned by Dr. Griffin. Thus, I look forward to hearing what it is. Warmest April regards, Patrick. Christina.
Michael writes, Kia ora, Twipsters. Hello from the Antipodes in NZ, where fall weather is heavily influenced by the southerly winds from the Tasman Sea and Southern Ocean. It is slightly overcast today in the Tutukaka coast and 23 degrees centigrades. That sounds pretty nice. With showers forecast for this afternoon and evening. We fell backwards, gaining an hour on Sunday, and the annual tsunami siren test reminded those of us who forgot to change our clocks. This siren also reminds many Kiwis to claim daylight savings as a New Zealand invention proposed by the entomologist George Hudson to allow for more work after hours to collect butterflies. As worthy a reason as any. And he wants to throw in a listener pick. I don't think we do them, but I suppose it's in the show notes, so you can have a look at that. I was not planning to reply to the Daniel Stump the Jump case, but 2 things piqued my interest and forced me to dig in. Daniel's patient is a pregnant 20-year-old from eastern Ghana with a history of frequent freshwater exposure in the Volta River Delta. She is G2P1 in her in her second trimester of what appears to be a previously uncomplicated pregnancy, now reporting bloody diarrhea, abdominal pain, and microscopic evidence of 2 ovoid forms seen in her stool sample. Ignoring a myriad of other pathogens that may play a role in this woman's presentation, I wish to hop on the Occam's razor and cut to the chase. 1. The 160 micron lateral spine ovoid unknown is the egg of Schistosoma mansoni, which is common in the Volta Delta, where I believe the range of the biomfilarial snail host has expanded after damming at Akasombo and Gpong, such that it now overlaps with Schistosoma hematobium. I know this structure well from my thesis work. Embolizing eggs into mouse lungs to study T helper mRNA cytokine dynamics during granuloma formation. Meanwhile, a young Barney Graham of COVID-19 mRNA vaccine fame worked on the bench behind me using the same system to evaluate T helper responses to RSV vaccine candidates for his thesis. His seminal breakthrough on how viral surface protein structure can influence protective versus pathological host immune responses. Vincent, can we please have him on TWiV? Okay, that was a bit of a detour, I guess. 2, cutting it to the chase. Initially, I assumed the second ovoid unknown would be ectopic excretion of Schistosoma hematobium from a concomitant urogenital infection, but the 45 times 30 micron did not fit, nor did this cryptic reference to a polar body. To stop the bloodletting from the razor, I went back to listening to the banter between Daniel and Dixon, and even to watching everyone's facial expressions, while Daniel described unknown number 2. Something was up between those two merry pranksters. I scoured the web and plied through old texts I have not touched in years, and but for a size comparison of helminth eggs, would I have not come across an uninteresting cestoid ovum, sizing in at 45 by 30 microns. Hello, Hymonolepis nana, the dwarf tapeworm, of worldwide distribution and little medical consequence, and polar thickenings from which extends filaments. Ha! I was hooked. And even better, I was in on their little inside joke. Fortunately for me, I was also rewarded by a heavy dose of geek and deep dive into the wonders left to discover in this field as I listened to TWiP 99. You get your polar bear from your nana. I will not spoil it here. I'd forgotten about that. To complete the workup, it would be prudent to confirm our patient's other risks which may complicate her pregnancy. Standard prenatal screening should include, among other regional recommendations, an HIV test, and if positive CD4 count, and viral load if possible. Treatment as per local guidelines should be followed for any concerning investigations to include treatments for her helminthiasis. I was aware praziquantel had a category B recommendation from safety developed in prior animal studies, but I see now a number of case series and recent placebo-controlled RCT studies show safety and efficacy in pregnant women to prevent complications. Verifying expulsion of the scolex would complete treatment, I believe. Can't wait to find if you stumped this jump. Hope not, as I could really use a new parasitology text updated to include the polar body bantered about by my most esteemed colleagues on last week's TWiP. Thanks for helping this peripatetic emergency doctor, immunoparasitologist, rekindle a love for the most mind-blowing field on the planet. Kia kaha, Michael. And we also have a picture of Michael, which was designed for the biology of parasitism course at Woods Hole a few years ago.
Dixon. Muted.
Yes, sir. Anthony writes, as luck would have it, a volume recently arrived at Jersey City Free Books. The cover photo is of a well-groomed adolescent boy in a suit. The smile could be from Norman Rockwell, but the eyes are from H.P. Lovecraft. In my mind, I heard Dr. Griffin's voice, a dark time in American history. The book is Manson by Ginn. The ova with the lateral projection, knife-like spike, are from Schistosoma mansoni. Schistosoma species are prevalent in Ghana since dam construction, and he gives a reference. Professor de Pommier has said, once you've found something, keep looking. And Dr. Griffin, Occam was not a physician. The crystal ball microscope slide has more to tell us. From what I can make from the CDC chart, and he lists the reference, the smaller objects are the eggs of a tapeworm, Hymenolopus nana. FWIW, Anthony.
Daniel.
Neil writes, hello, TWiP quadrifecta. Greetings from Guelph, Ontario, where it is 5 degrees C and rain snowing, super gross. I'm a long-time listener, started about 4 years ago when I joined the parasitology lab of John Barta at the Ontario Veterinary College, OVC. On top of lecturing at OVC, he also teaches a really excellent parasitology undergrad course that my friend Alex and I had the pleasure of taking. Thus, we submitted joint guess. I guess if we win, we'll set up a timeshare with the textbook. As for the pregnant 20-year-old woman in Ghana presenting with abdominal pain and bloody diarrhea, we think that she is suffering from both schistosomiasis from S. mansoni infection and trichoriasis from T. trichuria. Both seem to be present in this area of Ghana. Her symptoms seem to align well with trichoriasis, and the smaller ovoid body matches the egg morphology of T. trichuria. The schistosomiasis may be asymptomatic for now, as we don't really think the symptoms align very well, but the size or length of the ovoid form fits with the two schistosomes present in Ghana, mansoni and hematobium. However, the lateral projections suggest mansoni because we believe hematobium's projection is more distal. At least according to the single picture we have decided is 100% representative of both species. We're really good scientists. Both could occur from the extended time spent in and around the river. Love the show. Thank you so much for what you do, Neil.
Kevin writes, Dear worm doctors, regarding the pregnant Ghanian women, that's a spell check thing, with 2 types of ovoid forms in her stool, my guess is she's co-infected with trichiura, and schistosoma mansoni. I would guess that the abdominal pain and bloody diarrhea is caused by a heavy whipworm infection, although schistosomiasis could contribute to both. I would go with albendazole for treatment of the whipworm, praziquantel for schistosome. I found sources that indicated both are safe individually during pregnancy and that a combination therapy of the two is safe. Warm regards, Kevin. Christina.
If I may add a pronunciation before you go on, Ghanaian is the proper pronunciation.
What did I say?
Guinean. You said Guinean.
No, I said Guinean because she wrote Guinean, but I said she wrote the wrong thing because I think she got a spell check most likely, or he, yeah.
Right.
Ghanaian.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Sarah writes,
Christina.
Dear TWiP experts, it's evening in Philadelphia where it is -2 Celsius with blue skies, intense sunlight, with paroxysms of snow and gusts of freezing cold wind. My neighbour, an older gentleman, referred to this weather as wake-up weather. I am indeed awake. Dr. Griffin presents a 20-year-old woman with abdominal pain and bloody diarrhea in the second trimester of her pregnancy. She resides in eastern Ghana in a wet environment, spending time in the river, where her skin has likely encountered mosquitoes and snails, and cercaria released from them. Viewing her stool under a microscope, Dr. Griffin found 2 distinct ovoid morphologies. One oval, 160 microns along the long axis with a single lateral spike. 2, 45 by 30 micron ovoid forms with 2 polar bodies within them. I believe the 160 micron eggs are Schistosoma mansoni. I can't think of anything else that fits this description. I am guessing Dr. Griffin treated her with praziquantel, unsure of dose, ×2, and checked her stools for cure. They probably also repleted her iron to address any iron deficiency anemia in pregnancy. Praziquantel should be reasonably safe in the second trimester of pregnancy. I would not delay treatment. The blood in her stool seems to mean that the S. mansoni has begun to cause inflammation of her bowel wall, leading to ulceration and anemia. S. mansoni climbs into the blood vessels, draining the intestines. Somewhere in my piles of papers, I have a drawing of Mansoni the rhinoceros, which was my silly way of memorizing that Schistosoma mansoni eggs are the fattest and have a rhino horn that produces from the inside of the eggs. S. intercalatum I drew as an intergalacticum spaceship because it is narrow and really looks like a spaceship, and hematobium, which I think of as hematurabium, and through the egg looking like a bladder. Mekongai and Japonicum are smaller and rounder too, and I think of mini Mekongai coin to remember the roundness of the smallest of the Schistosoma group, which have relatively huge eggs as a cluster compared with other nematode eggs. And we have a drawing of all, of the rhinoceros and the spaceship. The 45 by 30 micron ovoid forms are harder to pin down. They seem to be a bit small for a hookworm, too round to be a whipworm, but the two bolar bodies sound like whipworm. And she isn't complaining of perianal itch, so I won't even consider pinworm. The term ovoid forms is vague enough that it could include the larger site amoeba eggs, Cytoisospora, but 35 microns is probably as big as the biggest amoeba eggs could be. So I'm going to say it's a whipworm, trichurius. The polar bodies are hard to imagine as anything else. I would give her albendazole or mebendazole, which are safe in the second trimester, though not in the first. I would also make sure she's taking multivitamins, and while she's in the clinic, do a thick smear for malaria and treat if necessary. I hope she's doing well and taking in plenty of iron. 2 questions I had for the experts. Is there any particular reason why East African trypanosoma is decreasing in prevalence? And for Dr. Griffin, what counselling would you have to offer this patient to avoid reinfection? Thank you so much for always teaching me so much and for the joy you bring. I look forward to TWiP episodes so much. Gratefully, Sarah.
Daniel, you want to answer that? Or do you want to wait?
Yeah, let's jump in. Actually, I'm sure Dixon will have a comment too. Christina, you may as well. So, East African trypanosomiasis, why is it decreasing in prevalence? Couple thoughts on this. One is as we've talked about before, Eastern African trypanosomiasis is transmitted by the tsetse fly, but the tsetse fly is quite different in East Africa. It's a very large geographic range, and it's predominantly going to be a life cycle that involves large game animals. So we're really seeing this when people go into these areas that are somewhat off limit, right? They're trying to keep poachers out. They're trying to limit it to tourists. Tourists are wearing their long pants. They're in vehicles. They're worried about spraying themselves up with repellent. You kill one tsetse fly and you've sort of cleared a whole large geographical area. It's a much easier disease, I think, to tackle versus Western African trypanosomiasis. Dixon, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I agree. And then they have some interesting continuing intervention strategies, one of which involves a car that pulls a zebra looking like dummy animal on 4 wheels. And out of the mouth of the dummy-looking zebra comes an odor which is reminiscent of the ruminant contents of a wildebeest. And it's attractive to the tsetse flies. And they run this thing up and down through the game parks. And you clear a tsetse fly, and you've cleared a square mile's worth of viewing area. And so these actually work. And so, these tsetse flies in the East African areas lay very few eggs, and they lay them underneath the acacia trees, whereas the West African variety of trypanosome vectors are totally different in their biology, and they lay millions of them along the riverbanks of the West African areas. So they've got totally different biologies, and there are very few animal reservoirs in the West than there are in the East. So, for all kinds of reasons, and don't forget, with the pandemic, and there's very few tourists that are traveling to these areas too. So you've got a downturn in tourism, and you've got really an interesting time going on for the diseases to all adjust back to their natural cycles.
Yeah, I don't know if I remembered this wrong, but I think of the tsetse fly as actually live birth, right? Actually has the
that's right. That's exactly right.
One at a time.
And
one at a time. Yeah. One at a time.
And then they actually feed their babies what's sort of almost like milk, right?
They do.
I love
the
tsetse fly. But I remember the old-fashioned tsetse fly traps, right, where they had they would do a dark color underneath, and somehow
that's right.
Because when the tsetse fly often bites an animal, it's going to bite on the dark underbelly. So the painting it a dark color, like maybe a dark blue or a black. But yeah, it's actually pretty impressive.
It is.
Thinking back to, I guess, the 1990s, the first time I saw a tsetse fly trap.
That's right. So. Plus the wars that have been going on between various tribes, various groups, various countries. It seems as Africa has sort of settled down into a lull compared to some other places throughout the world. So you haven't got a lot of displacement of people into places where they would rather not go, and those are the tsetse fly zones, basically.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm heading back to Uganda in the fall. So when I do, I will give everyone an update on how things are going with the control efforts.
Very cool.
All right.
We're going to take the next one, Vincent?
Yes, please.
Byron writes, "Hello, TWiP hosts. A new case. How exciting. Really appreciate Dr. Griffin's efforts to bring cases to the podcast so we can all be armchair ID doctors without license or insurance or both. In this case, I think the lateral projection gave it away. Sounds like they were the eggs of schistosomes, which according to PD7 could be seen throughout sub-Saharan Africa. No book yet, but we'll keep trying. Thanks again for the wonderful podcast. Have a great rest of the day." He sort of blew off the second egg, so I'm not sure he's eligible for a book. Do you? Well, we'll get to that.
We'll send him half a book.
We'll send him half a book. That's right. So at any rate, it was a good response, and it was a nice short one. I could take the next one if you wanted, but that's
sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Kimona writes, "Greetings, TWiP team. I've been an ardent listener for some time now and frequently enjoy older episodes during my drives to work or hikes in the woods. Full disclosure, began with TWiV, then I added some more TWiM, and finally TWiP. At Daniel's recent suggestion, thank you, I plan to be in Panama with floating doctors for a few weeks in July, which has accelerated my quest for parasitology knowledge even further. So after much trepidation surrounding the public shaming as a misdiagnosis may bring me, I am submitting the response. The 20-year-old Ghanaian female in her second trimester, presenting with abdominal pain and bloody diarrhea, who lives near the Volta River Delta, and stool microscopy findings of ovoid eggs from 160 microns to a single lateral projection, or with a single lateral, immediately makes me think of Schistosoma mansoni infection as one of the likely culprits of this woman's ailments. Heavy intestinal infections can cause intermittent abdominal pain and also intestinal hemorrhage from damage with the submucosa, which could explain the blood detected in her stool. Diagnosis of S. mansonius by ID of eggs in the stool, which is very diagnostic, with its very diagnostic lateral spawn. A rectal snip can also be used in lighter or intermittent infections to look for the presence of flame cells and thus identify whether an infection is active or not, and whether treatment is indicated. Blood tests looking for two schistosome glycoproteins, CCA and CAA, can also be used, as well as NAATS. The second and much smaller egg of 45 times 30 microns with its polar bodies caused me more trepidation. I turned to page 535 of my recently obtained but unsigned copy of PD7 and found only Hymenolopus nana fitting this size. H. nana, or dwarf tapeworm, is a cestode and is listed as having worldwide distribution. Most infections with H. nana in adults are described as asymptomatic and self-limited, whereas heavy infections can produce diarrhea. Headache, anorexia, and abdominal pain are also listed as possible, but unclear if these symptoms may be due to co-infections with other parasites. Diagnosis of H. nana is made by the identification of embryonated eggs in the stool, since it completes its entire life cycle within the human host. The polar bodies seen, which is what threw me off, I am guessing is simply a byproduct of cell division of the fertilized embryonated egg. Treatment with praziquantel is recommended in both S. mansoni and H. nana infections. In S. mansoni, it will depend on whether the infection is acute or chronic. The fever and flu-like symptoms or Katayama fever of an active infection are not mentioned. So here it's most likely chronic, and a single dose of praziquantel could produce or eradicate the worm burden and may even reverse some of the pathology of liver fibrosis if present. However, it should only be initiated if the infection is active, so perhaps a rectal snip is further indicated. In H. nana, a single dose of praziquantel, 5 to 10 milligrams per kilo, affecting both the cysticercoid in the villus tissue and the adult worm in the intestinal lumen, is recommended. Niclosamide may be used against the adult, but it is not effective against the metacestode and must therefore be used for several days and possibly repeated until no further eggs are present or in stool exam. I did question the safety of praziquantel in pregnancy and found a 2016 correspondence in The Lancet reporting multiple cases of rather high-dose praziquantel treatment in pregnant women without adverse side effects on the fetus, leading me to believe that would be considered safe. So to summarize, I can imagine that this unfortunate woman may have carried reasonably asymptomatic and undiagnosed infections of both H. nana and S. mansoni for quite some time, yet the added burden of pregnancy, the enlarged uterus, and its space consumption within the abdominal cavity and pressure on her IVC could be causing additional portal hypertension and congestion, perhaps exacerbating symptoms that were not previously prominent. She may also have immunocompromise. I do not recall Vincent's usually questioning for her HIV status. One could imagine a co-infection with hematobium and its associated FGS and increased risk of HIV despite marital status as possible. Her bloody diarrhea could exacerbate the mild anemia of pregnancy, largely due to volume expansion required to include the growing fetus. The good news, if any, is that both of these infections seem to respond to praziquantel treatment, squashing two parasites with one stone. I eagerly await listening to the final diagnosis. Thank you all for keeping me engaged and excited about parasitology. Kimona from rural southern Vermont, currently a balmy 51 degrees Fahrenheit. P.S. Much of the above came directly from PD7. Cool.
Daniel.
All right. I hope that's an accurate resource. Martha writes, Dear TWiP team, greetings from Eastern Massachusetts. Hope you are all staying well. I'm responding to episode 204. This is the case of the young woman from the Volta River Delta region in Ghana. We are told she is frequently in the river. She is in the second trimester of pregnancy when she presents with abdominal pain and bloody stool. We are also told that this is not her first pregnancy, but not the outcomes of prior pregnancies. How many prior pregnancies? Did she deliver at full term? Was the infant size appropriate for dates? And are the children living? I digress. We are given the result of a stool examination. Findings are a 160 micron ovoid structure with a single lateral projection and 45 by 30 micron ovoid structure with some polar structure. A browse through images of parasites ova suggests that the larger structure is Schistosoma mansoni and the smaller is Hymenalepsis nana. Both could contribute to her symptoms, although H. nana may be self-limited because she is pregnant and therefore somewhat immune suppressed. The infestation may persist. Both can be treated with praziquantel, which is category B in pregnancy. She is more likely to have a better pregnancy outcome without a parasitic infection. Is it possible for her to stay out of the river? Best wishes to you all, Martha.
Owen writes, Dear TWiP, the larger eggs sound like schistosoma mansoni, which in heavy infections can cause blood in the stool and abdominal pain. She has freshwater exposure too. Smaller eggs took some Googling, but my guess for those is Hymenolapus nana, which might also be contributing to diarrhea and gastric discomfort. Luckily, I think Prazi is a treatment for both. Okay, Christina.
Daniel writes, Hello TWiP, Team TWiP. It is 15 degrees with bright puffy clouds. Spring has sprung on the west coast, so now the garden is getting some attention. But now we must turn our attention to the pregnant woman in Ghana. Based on her symptoms and the ovoid forms found in stool, it seems that she has a dual infection with a schistosome and a nematode. Schistosome infections are acquired by wading in fresh water. These worms spend their adult lives in the mesenteric venules, laying eggs in the endothelial wall, which eventually penetrate their way into the intestinal lumen. I am not exactly sure how the eggs accomplish this feat, but cysteine proteases assist them along the way. This process causes GI bleeding, diarrhea, and inflammation that leads to malabsorption syndrome, which would not be good for a developing baby. The lateral spine on the egg means the identity of the schistosome is Schistosoma mansoni, unlike Schistosoma hematobium, which have a single medial spine on their eggs. As for the smaller ovoid forms, they could either be eggs from Trichuris, Trichura, or hookworms. My notes are failing me again as I don't have anything written down about polar bodies. I hope the rest of the team can fill in. Cheers, Daniel from Vancouver.
Dixon.
Okay. Andrew writes, Kiora from Pongarora. Weather is autumnal with a long-lasting La Nina supplying warm and humid weather. It is so good to be able to use my physical copy of PD7 to answer the question. Thank you, TWiP team. I so much prefer to read off paper than a screen. I could not find a table of parasitic ova and morphology online, but the suspicion that the young pregnant woman was infected with Schistosoma mansoni was firmed up by looking at the pictures in the book. She has either that or is hosting miniature sharks. The second type of eggs with polar bodies I cannot identify with such confidence, but I suspect Asteris lumbricoides. So if my guess is accurate, then after confirmatory tests, the young lady should be treated with praziquantel. That is safe for pregnant and breastfeeding women, according to drugs.com, and nitazoxanide if Asteris lumbricoides is the second infection. A tangential question, is drugs.com a reliable source of information? Not that I'm ever going to recommend anyone taking anything stronger than an aspirin. Nah, Andrew.
Daniel.
All right. John writes, Hello, Twipperati, and wishes for good weather to be springing forth for each of you. I have previously submitted some guesses, but unfortunately either submitted just a hair too late, been filtered out, and mistaken for spam, or in the case of TWiP 199, I've not quite known how to submit an answer with the tact of a clinician. I can only hope that I am not submitting a guess that is too far delayed again for this March 28th episode release. In the case of the 20-year-old Ghanaian woman who is with child, it appears that there is evidence of both parasites that may be the source of complaint as well as possible sourcing for future complaint. As the woman admits to often being in the rivers of the Delta, and the geography and description matches the specifications of exposure to Schistosoma mansoni via penetration by waterborne cercariae, it is likely that the ovoid forms found in the stool that measure 160 microns, as well as having a single lateral projection, are in fact the eggs of the adult female trematodes being shed from their residence in the patient's mesenteric venules. That said, it is not necessarily the case that S. mansoni would be related to the patient's complaint of abdominal pain and bloody diarrhea, as the patient is an adult and is not presenting typical acute response symptoms. It seems possible that the woman is a lifelong resident with repeat exposures to the parasite and may be developing towards indications of chronic schistosomiasis and associated fibrotic complications, as well as hepatosplenomegaly. Praziquantel treatment to remedy the infection may be administered immediately, as studies support an unlikely negative impact upon fetal development and birth weight. But label indications appear to assert use during pregnancy only if required. The secondary entity found in the stool, however, leads me to conclude that the S. mansoni may be the cause of the complaint, as while I am uncertain that the ovoid entities with polar bodies and measuring 35 by 40 microns fully fit the description, I am led by geography and best description for what I take to be said polar bodies as indication that these entities are fertilized, non-embryonated eggs of Trichuris trichura, living and shedding in the large intestine of the patient. As for treatment, T. trichuria would be albendazole or mebendazole, which have animal model teratogenicity indications, and the mother is in her second trimester. Treatment would only be administered if deemed necessary, which does not seem apparent due to the patient's infection appearing to be correlated to the S. mansoni infestation. I can only hope that I indeed staggered my way through the logic and elimination for this case. And as always, thank you for all such a great podcast that has done a fantastic job in igniting an interest in parasitism in myself and so many others. John A.
Danica writes, hello, TWiP team. I have very much enjoyed the discussion of the pronunciation of my name. Dixon is right. I do pronounce it Danica, not Danica. However, I have known several Danicas who pronounce it Danica. So both are correct, and it seems to be just a matter of preference. Regardless, I enjoy hearing Christina's pronunciation of everything. All right. Anyway, writing in for the Office of Infectious Diseases Assessment Unit Parasitism Club at a state health department. Oh. Most likely culprit for the pregnant Ghanaian women is schistosomiasis, also known as bilharzia, also known as snail fever. Bilharzia gets its name from Theodore Bilharz, who discovered the disease and life cycle, though we agree we would prefer not to have this disease named after us. Infection is acquired when people contact contaminated water and the fork-shaped larval worms penetrate the skin, ick, and become adult worms. Infection can be acute or chronic, intestinal or urinary, although most people do not develop symptoms of acute schistosomiasis when symptomatic symptoms include abdominal pain, bloody diarrhea, cough, malaise, headache, rash, body aches. Individuals who have had prior infections are most likely to develop high temperatures known as Katayama fever. Although symptoms resolve after a few weeks, mortality rates can be as high as 25%. In chronic schisto, symptoms can present months or years later. It may include formation of granulomas. Gold standard for diagnosis, eggs in the stool, though eggs are only intermittently passed and require adult worms to be producing eggs, so serological tests can be used to diagnose less advanced infections. Given that the woman is pregnant, treatment should begin immediately, as studies do suggest schisto infection during pregnancy can lead to low birth weight, preterm delivery, and an increased infant mortality rate. Fortunately, standard treatment with Prazi appears to be safe during pregnancy. Mass drug administration of Prazi has been successful in Egypt, where prevalence of S. hematobium in Middle and Upper Egypt fell from an average 29.3% in 1977 to less than 3% by the end of the 90s. Followed by an even lower rate for S. mansoni, 1.5%. The assumption is that mass drug administration would lead to reduction in excretion of eggs, contamination of the environment, infection of the snail population, which in turn would lead to less source of infection for humans. However, for those who do not comply or are not covered by mass drug administration, such as school-aged children who are not enrolled in school, they may still spread the infection. Interestingly, one of our team members is from Egypt, and he said that the flip side of the mass drug administration project was that it utilized syringes before disposable syringes and was the unfortunate main cause for Hep C spread. Fortunately, Hep C is now controlled by the modern treatment options, and Prazi can be administered orally. Most of our team works in sexually transmitted infections, so we took particular note of the fact that urogenital infection in women can increase the risk of HIV. Final note for Daniel, rigorous towel drying after contact with potentially contaminated water is advised, but may not be sufficient to prevent infection. Thanks for the fun case. Okay. Christina.
Dear TWiP professors, greetings from the Parasitology Club at the University of Central Lancashire in the beautiful northwest of England. We would like to add our considered opinion for the case of a 20-year-old pregnant woman who resides near Volta River in eastern Ghana in sub-Saharan Africa. The woman was in her second trimester and complained about abdominal pain, often with bloody diarrhea. The Volta River Basin is a freshwater body used by locals for daily chores. The most probable cause for her condition is schistosomiasis. Schistosoma mansoni is a blood trematode, a fluke, producing elongated ova of 155 to 160 microns in length, which has a small lateral spine, as shown in Figure 1. And he cites Depomier et al., 2019. When excreted through the feces of an infected human into freshwater body, the eggs hatch and release myricidia, which uses freshwater snails of the genera Biomphalaria as their intermediary hosts. We get another reference. Free-swimming cercaria develop and are released from snails into the water body. Cercaria can easily penetrate through human or animal skin and transform into schistosomulae, which migrate via venous circulation and reach the portal vein system to mature into male and female adult worms. After copulation, the female lays eggs in the mesenteric venules of bowel or intestine, which are passed into stools. The worms are relatively harmless to human hosts. However, eggs cause severe disease and symptoms in the intestinal tract. And we've got another reference. Granulomas form around the egg, and early symptoms include rash or itchy skin. After several years of infection, the adult worms can damage the liver, intestines, lung, and bladder. According to a study conducted by Durso et al., pregnant women in their second trimester have increased chances of getting intestinal parasitic infection due to several factors. These infections can be treated with praziquantel since it is most effective against the adult worm. Thank you for another interesting case. Pratham Surana on behalf of the Parasitology Club. And we've got a reference list here as well.
There you go. Nice set of guesses.
Yes.
Right,
all right,
Dixon?
I guess we have 3 more guesses to go. Who shall go first?
Christina.
Okay, ladies first, I suppose.
You bet.
I think, the bigger egg can really only be Schistosoma mansoni. There wasn't any doubt in me at all. And actually, the other egg, the size, there's really only one egg that fits the size range and the description. So I would also go for Hymenalepis nana as the second diagnosis. And I think we had quite a few curious guesses there. And I was wondering, that's probably because of the 2 polar plugs at the end on the kind of outside the lids, so to speak. So maybe these were maybe confused with the polar bodies inside the Hymenalepis nana. So I hope I'm not wrong, because that would be hugely embarrassing. But it would be really convenient because of the treatment, because then you only need 1 drug. So the fewer drugs in pregnancy, the better, I would think. So yeah, that's my guess.
Dixon, what do you think?
I have a simple response. I concur 100%.
Yeah, the schisto is the egg is a giveaway, but these two talking about nanas and polar bears, that gave away nana too.
Did that bring you back to memory? I was entertained by that. It was nice. I think the letters sort of captured some of the people who've been listening for a while. The towel off vigorously episode.
Yep.
And my mnemonic about how to remember the polar body in Hymenalepis nana.
Yep.
So a couple, I think, interesting issues. So, it was, wonderful to actually see these myself under the microscope because, I don't know, there's a joy maybe that comes to a parasitologist's heart when they get to see a Schistosoma mansoni egg in a light microscope prep. But also the Hymenalepis nana, I don't know, that for me is a very beautiful ova, so it was nice to see that as well. But a couple other things come up. One is we'll start with symptoms, right? What are the symptoms coming from? Like, and should we be treating this woman? And that does get a little complicated, right? So, starting in reverse, Hymenalepis nana. This is controversial whether or not it causes a lot of symptoms. In heavy infestations, probably. More in children, maybe the fact that she's pregnant sort of raises that as a potential. The other, schistosoma mansoni, again, we would usually treat that in pregnancy. Sort of unclear, whether or not there's a heavy enough, infection here that's actually triggering the symptoms as well. And then comes the issue of treatment. And I think that's important here. So praziquantel is recommended. It's now endorsed by the WHO. And so, and particularly, we're sort of lucky, right? I mean, she's second trimester. We all feel a little more comfortable. None of us are that excited about drugs during the first trimester of pregnancy, even when we're told it's okay. But yeah, so this woman treated with praziquantel, sort of a standard approach here. And I think a couple interesting things about the Hymenalepis nana life cycle. This is another one of those parasites that can have an auto-infectious life cycle in the host, sort of reminding us of the strongyloides as that potential. And I don't know if people remember, but the story of the man with advanced AIDS who actually had the Hymenalepis nana tumor that was published in the New England Journal. Really, it was a number of years ago. It just come out like right as I was on my way to India. So, of course, it was what we were all discussing in Tamil Nadu. Apparently, he guessed who I was hanging out with. If that was the topic of excited discussion.
All right. Oh, so Daniel, someone asked if drugs.com is a reputable site. Do you know anything about that?
Not a site that I use, actually.
Okay. All right, time to give away a book. We had 14 people who have not won a book before. Dixon, may I have a drum roll?
You may.
The number is 11. 11. Owen, you are the winner. So send me your address, TWiP@microbe.tv. And if you are out of the U.S., also a phone number, please.
Aha.
Congratulations. So he gets schistosoma and Hymenalepis. So he got it right.
Yeah.
So he gets a full book, right?
And he commented
we don't tear it in half and send the other half to
and he commented that, and it is sort of nice, convenient, that praziquantel would treat both. So it sort of makes it an easy lift from a treatment. And I don't make this up. So this happened to be, a pregnant woman, second trimester, these two pathogens. So it's sort of a nice story to share.
So you didn't actually cover how she caught the Hymenalepis nana.
Well, that's interesting. So how do you catch Hymenalepis nana? It's actually oral, right? Somehow this went into her mouth, right? So
how does that work?
So, people put things in their mouth. They put, different things in their mouth, and somehow it got. So, sometimes there can be rodents, right? Sometimes rodents are part of this life cycle. Sometimes other human beings can be part of this life cycle. So you're actually going to ingest infected arthropods, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So
mealworms. It's a lot of it is in mealworms that infect flour or grains or cornmeal, and you barely see these little bugs as they compete with each other for most of the bugs that have been studied in the lab that are involved in this. They're looking for behavioral changes in the insect as a result of acquiring the intermediate stages of the tapeworm. So there's a lot of contamination out there. People don't have airtight lids that, with screw caps mostly. When they harvest grain, they store it in loose containers so they can always access it. And that's the reason why a lot of other diseases that are spread by rodents also occasionally cause outbreaks, like I'm blocking on the name of the natalensis, the multimimate rat,
Lassa fever.
whose feces is causing Lassa fever.
Lassa,
And
yes.
they're driven by weather events and climate change. And when crops fail, rodents run into houses to try to find food, and they urinate. And the same happens with smaller rodents like mice when they take their evening meals, which why a lot of people keep cats in their houses. Well, of course, with a pregnant woman and a cat, you got another problem. So it's a pyramid of life forms all vying for the same host, basically. So it's always been interesting to discuss the ecology of these things, but I realize that time is limited and we have to move on.
No, I have to say, actually, Dixon, this is the area that I think I find the most exciting about infectious disease. I get to go in, take a seat, and be like, all right, so tell me your whole story. Where were you born? Tell me everything about you.
Exactly.
And that's where the clue is. I mean, I think that's why they call us, because we'd love to hear the whole, and then you hear something, you're like, oh,
Right. Or comebacks. Some of these organisms are making comebacks because of not climate change necessarily, but also because of displacement of people. And the host range, like for instance, Dracunculus medinensis, which was another one we haven't discussed in recent past.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's making a comeback in some places because of the wild dogs that are also expanding their range, and they're the reservoir host for it. So.
Yeah,
the Reservoir Dog movie probably should be played along with that.
Don't watch that movie. Don't watch it. Very too violent. Yeah, maybe on a future TWiP we'll introduce this case. But no, I was just a couple weeks ago in the office, and I was talking to this woman. We're trying to figure out what was going on, and she's like, "No, born in Long Island, still live in Long Island." And I was like, "Really, whole life?" And the husband was in the room. He's like, "Well, we did live in Singapore for a couple of years. We were in Japan for a couple of years. We were, he started going through this list of, but the wife's like, oh, but we've moved back."
Yeah.
You may have moved back, but I care about all this stuff in the middle there. But
the parasites haven't caught up you. That's what you think. So you're going to ask me now if we have a hero. I hope, and we do. Yes, we do, and it's an unfortunate hero because we're memorializing her life because she was born in 1963 and passed away in 2022. Dr. I'm sure I'm going to butcher her first name. So let's, Daniel, you knew this woman. So can you pronounce her name?
Actually, Chuck knew her, and he was actually the one who really brought this to the attention that we should be making this.
I see.
And so Moella Selle.
Moella Selle. It's melodic. It's a beautiful first name. Mtuli Malasella. And I will read the whole thing. It is with deep sadness that we announce the passing on February 10th of 2022 of Dr. Masweli Natuli Malasella, Director of WHO's Department of Control of Neglected Tropical Diseases. Dr. Malasella died after a prolonged illness at the age of 58. She was among the most well-known and respected public health leaders in Africa. Melewe, as she was known, attended Wero Girls Secondary School and studied at the University of Dar es Salaam, where she graduated in zoology. She completed her PhD in parasitology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and her main area of academic interest was lymphatic filariasis. She left London to return to her home country of Tanzania, where she worked as a junior scientist at the National Institute for Medical Research at Amani and Dar es Salaam. Her work focused on immunoepidemiology of filarial infections. Her impressive work and dedication led to her appointment as the first woman to become the Director General of Tanzania's National Institute for Medical Research. Melewe led the launch for a mass health campaign in Tanzania in 2000, which eventually led to a global campaign dedicated to treat the 120 million plus people affected with lymphatic filariasis. This was a first and led to the recognition that more work needed to be done in the field of tropical diseases. Because of her work, Tanzania is on track to eliminate lymphatic filariasis as a public health problem by the year 2024. This is a remarkable accomplishment, and it is due to her persistent work dedication, and care for those affected by tropical diseases. Malasela was known for her remarkable skills in diplomacy, innovation, and generosity. She dedicated her life to improving the health and well-being of the most vulnerable. There's more. Dr. Malasela was awarded the Kalimi Prize by the Coalition for Operational Research on Neglected Tropical Diseases and an honorary degree of Doctor of Science from the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine in 2021. December 2018, Dr. Malasela was appointed as WHO Director of Department of Control of Neglected Tropical Diseases. Her work as Director of the Department of Control of Neglected Tropical Diseases led to the development of the new roadmap for 2021-2030, the blueprint, ending the neglect to attain the Sustainable Development Goals, a roadmap for neglected tropical diseases, which was launched in January of 2021. Dr. Malasela was remembered as a tireless advocate of tropical disease treatment, a committed humanitarian, and highly respected professional. We will miss her dedication and inspiring leadership. Our condolences are with Moeli's family and close relatives, as well as those in the global health community around the world who mourn her loss. We thank you for that submission. That was that was under my radar screen, but I'm glad now that I was totally aware of it.
Thanks to Chuck Knirsch for bringing this to our attention. Actually, Hannah, our new global intern, worked with Chuck to put together this dedication.
Very nice.
So really, you hate to lose someone so young. During these difficult times, you need people like this. So
absolutely.
Are we doing a paper now? Is that the plan?
We do. And Christina's going to just drag us kicking and screaming.
She's going to zoom through this.
I think
oh my God, so much math.
I can keep it quite short, and I actually thought in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the hardcore pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. I think that would make sense. That might also be too detailed.
But wait, Christina, I really wanted to focus on some of the modeling here. And
I'll be looking forward to your explanation.
and the math behind it.
Anyway, I kind of thought I chose that paper because the previous case that we had was on onchocerciasis, and I thought, I usually go away and start reading a little bit more. So I came across this paper, and it's called Drug Development for the Treatment of Onchocerciasis, a Population Pharmacokinetic and Adverse Events Modeling of emodepside. And I'm actually not sure if I'm pronouncing that drug correctly, but that's what I'm going to use. And this paper is published in PLOS Neglected Tropical Diseases, which is open access, so anybody can have a look at it. The first author is Frauke Asmus, and the final author is Joel Tarning, and they're from various parts in the world. So I find actually drug development in this area really interesting because we don't really have all that many drugs to treat onchocerciasis. So if you remember from last time, so we have ivermectin, which does not kill the adult, but it kills microfilaria, which kind of prevents disease manifestations, I suppose. And it also suppresses the microfilarial release for several months. But if you do really, want to break the transmission cycle, the treatment needs to be repeated yearly for a long time because this adult worm can live for up to 15 years. So it does take a long time if you want to kind of break the transmission and bring that infection under control. And there's also been some kind of emerging suboptimal responses emerging in Ghana and Cameroon. So there may be, I don't know if that might be related to resistance. I didn't look into that. And there's another drug actually that has been approved by the FDA, which is similar to ivermectin, and that's moxidectin. So that is not really significantly killing adult worms either, but it does suppress microfilaria release for a longer period of time. But as far as I'm aware, this is not really used in mass drug administration programs at all. But maybe, Daniel, if you have a patient here, that might be something that you might consider since it is approved in the US. I don't know. And then we have doxycycline, which does actually kill the symbiont bacteria. And it also, by extension, actually kills and sterilizes the adult worms. So the issue that we have there is the treatment needs to be quite long as well. So it's 6 weeks. So that's not ideal either. And you would use that in combination with ivermectin. So, and these drugs are really used, to control onchocerciasis in endemic regions with mass drug administrations, and it's ivermectin essentially that's used, and that treatment has to be done annually for many years. So issue there being is, you may not capture everybody, so there may also be hypoendemic areas where you don't capture people and they're maybe not being picked up by treatments. So if you actually want to thoroughly eliminate this disease, I think that is maybe not ideal. But the programs have been successful in the Americas, so it can work. But I think the implementation is quite difficult because it's a long-term project. There's conflict and there's limited funding available, and obviously places where you can't reach people. And it's also problematic where there's LOA, because ivermectin can induce severe side effects when there's a really high LOA burden. So that's really why we need a new drug, an adult worm killer, so to speak. And that's what this drug is, the emodepside. And this paper looks at how this drug has really been processed in the body, and kind of just to plan further clinical studies. So this paper really wants to find out. So this is maybe I should tell you a little bit about that drug as well. It might be quite useful. So emodepsin is actually a cat dewormer. I have some in my cupboard. Need to remember to deworm the cat. So it is used in combination with praziquantel. I think the trade name is Profender. And actually, it's a broad spectrum antihelmintic. So it does kill a lot of different intestinal worms in many different species of animals. So it could potentially be really valuable. We actually also know the drug target. I don't know if that would be too geeky or niche, but it is actually targeting a voltage-gated potassium channel, so it affects the membrane potential, but not, as a matter of fact, in humans or mammals, so that is quite handy. And these studies have been done in Xenopus levis frog eggs, which I always find really, really interesting. I didn't know this is still done regularly, but really fascinating. Anyway, so this drug has been identified in trials, for example, in cattle. So it's been shown that it's potentially effective to treat a very closely related parasite, which is onchocerca. And I'm going to have a look. Onchocerca, something else. Ochengi in cattle, which I think is the authors say this is the most closely related parasite to Onchocerca volvulus. So this has actually shown dose-dependent inhibition of adult mobility in 3 to 5 days, so really quickly. It's also sterilizing and kills microfilaria, and also there's partial killing of adults. So, that's a drug that is potentially quite interesting. So that's why really people are looking into developing this drug clinically for human treatment. And this is an initiative that is done by the Drug for Neglected Diseases Initiative, which is based in Geneva, DNDI, and the drug is sponsored by Bayer, which I think they must be the producers. So anyway, actually I also chose that paper because it's really always good to remember how much goes into developing a drug before it can reach the market and actually can be used. So this study here, so there has been phase 1 clinical trials. So we know the drug is safe in healthy adults. Obviously now we need to take that into further clinical trials. And actually in this paper, this is a paper in preparation of clinical phase 2 trials, so that we can actually start testing that drug on people that are infected with onchocerciasis. So this study really looks at, so they really want to find out how to best administer the drug to achieve an optimal concentration in the plasma and with minimal side effects. So in order that they can then undertake clinical phase 2 trials. And they really based that on the 3 initial phase 1 clinical trials. And I'm not really going to go into detail of the data, but what they found out actually, so they had they were all healthy male adults. So, I mean, that's a typical issue with clinical trials, isn't it? I mean, young, healthy males. I don't know if they volunteer more, or I don't really know. But anyway, that's probably a bit of an issue, and that needs to be expanded to other populations. But they kind of were. They had individual information on these patients, so they were in these clinical trials. They were looking at different formulations, for example, single dose or liquid or tablets or fast release tablets, or in a fasting state, or were these people fed? So there was quite a lot of information they had then to model their kind of pharmacodynamic observations. And they did actually find that the modeling on a population level that they'd done with lots of math that I don't understand actually fits very well. But I think maybe Daniel, you wanted to go into the detail there, just teasing. So they are consistent with the observation that they found on an individual level. And so actually the conclusion is, so they did some modeling of different types of, they were kind of thinking that they were comparing. So they kind of found that this drug is a drug that is very quickly absorbed, and it has a really long half-life. So that is really useful because it remains at high concentrations in the plasma for a long period of time, which I think is really important, because they said the drug had to be at a high level for a minimum of 5 days to be effective as an antiparasitic for this filarial worms. So, and then based on that modeling that I'm not going to explain, I'm going to jump straight to the conclusions. They looked at the relationship between this I forgot the name of the drug now. How terrible is that? Emodepside and treatment emergent adverse effects. So, they were looking kind of at do the people get unwell? And actually, they found that the drug is safe, and they kind of worked out what a dosage would be safe to use in further clinical trials. I think the adverse effect that that have been described are eye disorders and CNS disorders, but we don't really have any details as to what that might be. And they're also not sure what the mechanistic, what might be the reason for that. But it is dose dependent. So they have then been able to kind of work out a dosage that is tolerable for further clinical trials. So that would cause, I think their threshold was that it would cause severe adverse effect in less than half of the study population. And the adverse effects are generally very mild and very transient. So just a few hours of discomfort. So that was what they kind of worked out, what they needed to use. And so they also figured out with those studies what would be the good plasma level concentration for effect. And they actually proposed and modeled study arms that they could be using for a future phase 2 trial. And I think that's really quite promising because it's a drug that is safe. It's a drug that, so they worked out they would need can't find my last piece of paper where I wrote down what dosage they needed. Let me just skip through to that last page. Conclusions. Yes, so they actually worked out that they would propose for these studies, the proposed dosing regimen would be for 10 days, twice daily, and I think it would be with 10 milligrams with 10 milligrams. So, they're kind of now taking that forward. And I've actually looked up on the Drugs for Neglected Tropical Diseases Initiative website. So phase 2 trials are now commencing. So training has been given, and I'm not sure if hopefully those clinical trials will be based on the findings that we have in that paper. But I think that would be really useful because 10 days, that's short compared to 15 years of annual treatment, and also compares quite short to 6 weeks of doxycycline. So I think that would be quite an interesting drug to further develop, and really that's why I picked that paper. So I think that's me.
So I like this paper, actually. And a lot of things came to mind as I was going through it, right? So there's a lot of complicated, math and pharmacology. But at the end of the day, right, in a lot of these research, you're not going to have a pharmacist with you. So we've got to sort of get it to a simple, how do you do it? And this whole idea that it's going to be twice a day for 10 days, going to actually kill the adults. So the macrofilaricidal is going to kill the microfilaria, so microfilaricidal. And then it sort of actually reminded me of, I was Googling this a little bit, I don't know if people have ever seen the dosing polls for praziquantel. So even though it's weight-based, you sort of, a lot of times they'll use these polls, and with praziquantel, they'll actually mark on the polls, and you measure the kids, you measure the adults, and based upon the height, you're sort of getting an estimate of what the weight and what the right dose of the medication. So I'm imagining these dosing polls going around, hopefully dosing people for their 10 days. And it would be tremendous because right now, what a commitment, right? 10 years of being on these mass drug administration. We're making progress, but we're not eradicating. Maybe we're starting to get ready to find drugs where we can move to that next sort of, I think, higher goal. But exciting stuff.
It is, yeah. I actually forgot to mention it's also dependent on the body weight. So you'd have to adjust the dose for body weight because you reminded me of that with the poll. And the other thing is also that, the drug needs to be administered in a fasting state. So food interacts. So that's the other thing. But yeah, it would be really tremendous. And also, it would be really interesting now to find out how, what's happening to people who then maybe also have lower, that would be another interesting thing. Maybe that would be that stone that squashes 2 parasites that one of our writers have mentioned. I mean, I haven't found any information, but it is problematic to treat co-infected people.
Yeah, there's even I was wondering, I think Dixon, maybe you've run across these, but there are these color-coded ivermectin dosing polls that they use. Because again, ivermectin is also weight-based. But again, it's hard, like you can't weigh everyone. So they have these color-coded polls, and the tablets are a certain, number of milligrams. They always were 3. I guess there now are 6 milligrams, but they were always 3. And then depending upon which color, it was, how many pills does each person get for their mass drug administration. So.
Interesting. It should also be mentioned the reason why it takes so long to administer this elimination program is because the adult is not killed and its natural lifespan is like 15 to 20 years. So you have to wait for the worm to die of old age. And in the meantime, you have to sterilize it. And it's a program that worked. The amazing thing is that it worked, and in many countries, they're now onchocerciasis free, and they appreciate the effort that the people had to put in order to stick with this program too, because they realize that the blindness aspect isn't going to go away just because you're treating people and preventing them from becoming blind. The blind people stay blind. And as a result, it's a tragedy in all of those countries. And to ask them to now give up another 15 to 20 years of waiting to see if this thing is going to work, this is heroic patient buy-in from populations that don't understand anything about these diseases other than they're horrible and that they don't want them anymore. And so they're willing to do anything. In fact, I can remember Bob Gwads, who was a lecturer in our course and a medical entomologist who used to travel to Africa a lot, told us a story once about two warring factions in West Africa that actually stopped to allow the drugs to be administered for both sides before they went back to killing each other. So
that was the famous Carter in the Sudan.
Okay.
They actually, they were for 6 months. They stopped fighting so that
that's right.
The Carter Center could get in there.
Just amazing. They did the same thing for black fly control when they were spraying the rivers to try to get rid of the black flies instead of taking this approach of trying to kill the parasites. And it's I'm wondering now, what happens to the dead adult worms because they're not small?
Yeah, they're big.
They take up a lot of space. Now they become a necrotic lesion. Do they become a hard fibrotic lesion that stays there forever and is as disfiguring, or does it absorb? And do patients return to a normal life? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Having recently seen patients with these nodules, they're fairly superficial.
Yep.
It's it might be a time like when you go in with these, we're going to eliminate things. Maybe it makes sense to actually, and this might be a question for when you start using this drug. Do you then at a certain time do and it's a small surgery. It's not huge general anesthesia. You should be able. These are right there. You feel them superficially. Do you go and actually remove these nodules that are really these nests of? Pretty amazing how large these worms are when they get pulled out of those.
Exactly.
Nodules.
I mean,
it might also be quite useful. In areas where maybe it's not considered a major public health problem, where we don't actually have mass drug administration programs. So then if you have a patient that comes and is diagnosed and could potentially be treated, I suppose so. But then I was wondering, obviously they've done these studies on healthy volunteers, so these people actually do not have onchocerciasis. So I wonder, because it's also killing the microfilaria, you might still have issues that you also have, when you treat onchocerciasis, when you get the Masotti reactions or these systemic allergic reactions. So we don't obviously know, that might be a similar issue with that drug. So it might not be perfect, but it's certainly something interesting to further study. So yeah.
Is this a natural product or is this a synthesized?
No, I do actually. I do somewhere have written down what it is. I think it's synthesized from another drug. Where's my drug? I've got a list of drugs. So it's synthesized from a parent compound with the poetic name PF1022A. So I don't know. It must come from some kind of library of compounds, and I didn't.
I wonder what the PF stands for. Does that stand for Plasmodium falciparum?
I have absolutely no idea. I did write down somewhere what the chemical modifications were, but I can't find it. So
it's usually the company name.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But this emodepside, I think, is it's marketed by Bayer. So, but we don't know.
All right, Daniel. The question is, does it inhibit SARS-CoV-2?
That's right.
Oh my gosh! Good God!
The good thing is that it's not going to have a veterinary application, so nobody will take horse paste.
Yes,
that's right. That's right.
Catty
Right,
wormers. They will take catty wormers, won't they?
Catty wormers. That's right. Thank you, Christina. Daniel, do you have a case for us?
I do. I'm gonna take out my little notebook here, where I have another case. All right. So I actually have, it's two individuals, 2 for 1. And this is like, maybe this is the reverse of Occam. It's like 2 people can have the same thing, maybe. So it's 2 women that I meet. One is older. She's in her 80s. Another's in her 50s. So the woman who is in her 80s, she had 9 children, right? So lots of kids. They've all actually, grown up by now, right? She lives in a village, as does the 50-year-old woman we'll talk about in a moment. There's a really large lagoon. I actually got a chance to walk through this village. There are lots of mosquitoes. She's a little concerned about a cut on her left lower extremity. She's had this chronic swelling of her left leg. She noticed some swelling in the groin area. Then the entire leg became swollen, and it's really been chronically swollen and enlarged for much of her life. She walks around barefoot, and there are many areas that are hypopigmented and scarred. We also have this 50-year-old woman, same village, married with 4 children. And she initially noticed that both her legs started to swell. She actually has felt that her legs have been cold. She also reports lots of mosquito bites. But over time, again, it's her left lower extremity has become hard. It's become swollen, kind of disfigured to some degree. She has actually had to go to the hospital because of an ulcer that is formed on this really large, swollen left leg. She does complain that this shouldn't be a problem because there's supposed to be medicine that would keep people from getting this, but with the corruption, there has not been the appropriate mass drug administration in her village. She says this is quite a common problem for people that have these large lower extremities. Her sister, her husband, not quite as bad as her. Okay.
Do either one have HIV/AIDS?
So there's actually there's no HIV in this village, which I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's what's communicated.
Which country are we talking about?
So this is excellent. So we are in Ghana. We are about we're in the I guess it's the beautiful about 5 hours west of Accra, where is it the Ivory Coast? It is beautiful beach area, but there are these villages where there are these large lagoons.
Right.
So yes, we are in West Africa. We are in Ghana. We are in the western part of Ghana, pretty rural areas.
So is it the case that many people in this village grow up with this condition, a similar condition?
Unfortunately, this is quite a problem in this village, and it apparently was less of a problem, but there's problems particularly with this village as far as them getting access to the medications.
What about the men? Do they have this problem as well?
Some do, but it tends to be more women, but no, some men are affected as well.
With a different problem, I presume, as well.
So I'm sure that there are some men that have that different problem.
Yes. We won't go there right now.
Okay.
I don't think
any further questions?
I don't think I have any questions now.
No.
Very good. All right. That'll do it for TWiP 205. You can find the show notes at microbe.tv/TWiP. You can send us a question, a comment, a guess to this case today. TWiP at microbe.tv. If you enjoy what we do, consider supporting us, microbe.tv/contribute or parasiteswithoutborders.com. Either way, your contributions are federal U.S. tax deductible. Dixon Despommiers at Racaniello.org, thelivingriver.org. Thank you, Dixon.
I had a great time again, and lovely wanderings through the wonderful world of parasites.
Daniel Griffin's at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, parasiteswithoutborders.com. Thanks, Daniel.
Pleasure as always.
And Christina Nola is at the University of Glasgow. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you all. I had a fantastic time. I really enjoyed tonight.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. I'd like to thank the American Society for Microbiology for their support of TWiP and Ronald Jenkins for the music. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We will be back next month. Another TWiP is
parasitic.
parasitic.